Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the Panther M10, the Tier 7 German Premium Medium Tank. This tank is currently available from the gift shop, and it's currently available from the tech tree, although it is on sale at the moment, at least here on the EU server, but it usually costs 5,750 gold. And the question we're going to be asking today is this tank worth 5,750 gold, or less if you pick it up on a discount? Now again, I'm stressing the word currently. It is being removed from the tech tree, it is being removed from the gift shop, because it's another one of these tanks that gets special matchmaking, and you're no longer going to be able to get your hands on this tank, assuming of course I get the video out when I plan to get it out. But is this tank worth 5,700 gold? Well, let's find out. So as per usual, let's talk about the history of the tank. But the Panther M10 was a Panther that was modified to look like an M10 Wolverine. They did quite a good job. I imagine at distance this would actually look like an M10 Wolverine. They went so far as to give it American camo. They put a star on the side of the tank so it doesn't have the traditional German markings, and it was used as part of the Ardennes offensive. In 1944, the German forces were on the back foot. They were being pushed back on all fronts by the Allies. Hitler hatched up a plan for one last big offensive, and it was to take place in the Ardennes, a big push of about 300,000 men through Belgium, Luxembourg, and basically northern France. But prior to the Ardennes offensive, which began on December 16th, 1944, the German forces infiltrated American lines with German commando units, and these German commando units were dressed like Americans. They were using American equipment. They had American half-tracks, American armor. They were supposed to have Shermans, and their job was to go behind enemy lines prior to the offensive starting and basically cause confusion and chaos, and also to capture some key bridges and various strategic points. Now, while the commandos were very successful, unfortunately they were undermanned. They were supposed to have 3,000 men, they only had 2,500. They were supposed to have 13 Shermans, but they ended up only having 2. But one thing they did have was Panther M10s. These were Panthers that were converted to look like the M10 Wolverine. When we take a look at the tank, we can see the changes that were made to the Panther to make it look like a Wolverine. Starting with the rear of the tank, and you can see the actual modeling in game is very good. I have to say, hats off to Wargaming. They've done a wonderful job on this model. But you can see here you've got the rear of the tank, and you can see some welds here, and this welding extends down the side of the tank, and that was to disguise the rear of the tank as an M10 Wolverine. So that you've got the original Panther hull here, but you've got this huge added area here, which is to make it look more like an American tank. They didn't stop there. I mean, if you look at the sides, you can actually see sheet metal added to the sides. It's performs no function. It's not spaced armor in game, but it was simply just to break up the silhouette of the tank, make it more like a Wolverine. But you can see that these side areas here were just added sheet metal. So the rear of the tank, all of this is false, the side is false. We take a look at the front again. Look at the welds. You can see the welding here, and it extends down. So this is the original Panther hull here, and all of this area here was added to the tank. This is just sheet metal that was designed to look like a Wolverine. Likewise, the lower glacis on the Panther is actually quite angled, and that extends down here. But again, if we look at the front of the tank, you can see that all of this area here, the rounded front of the tank, that's all fake armor. It's all false armor. That was all added to the game. You can see how straight this is and how angled the lower glacis is on a Panther. The Panther M10, all of this was added, and it's all fake. I think the welding, the detailing here, it's absolutely amazing. Well done to Wargaming. And the cosmetic changes also applied to the turret. You can see here, again, you've got lots of welding applied to the turret. You've got some original welding here. I don't know what that was supposed to accomplish. Maybe the added armor to the sides made it look more like a Wolverine, and this was an aborted first attempt. But again, you've got sheet metal that's simply been added to the turret, sides of the turret, in order to make it look more like the silhouette of an M10 Wolverine. If we take a look at the front of the Panther, you can see the very rounded gun mantlet that is very distinctive on a Panther. And when we look at the Panther M10, you can just see the tip of this. It's been cut through the this added metal to the front of the turret, and in-game, Unlike the rest of this armor, which does not count as spaced armor, this armor here added to the gun mantlet actually does count as spaced armor. The other major change that happened to the Panther to become the Panther M10 was the removal of the commander's cupola. Again, if we take a look at the Panther, you can see the traditional commander's cupola here. It's the viewports are here, and it's a weak spot on a Panther, but a Panther M10 does not have that. It was cut away. Simply a door was added and the cupola was completely cut away. The downside to that was the fact that its viewports were removed, and that's reflected in game as this tank has very, very poor view range due to the fact it doesn't have viewports and doesn't have a commander's cupola. But overall, I think the tank looks great. I think the model looks great, and well done to Wargaming for modeling it so accurately in game. But getting back to the history, unfortunately the Panther M10s were not infiltrated at the beginning of the Ardennes offensive, so they didn't actually get an opportunity to go behind enemy lines and cause confusion. What actually happened were the Panther M10s were used as standard frontline battle tanks when the main offensive began on December 16th, 1944. So the tank did see combat, and in one action against the 120th Infantry Division, one Panther M10 was destroyed, 3 were captured, and on examination of the destroyed and captured tanks, the serial numbers of the tanks indicated that there may have been as many as 10 Panther M10s built. However, what happened to the other 6, we never found out. But as far as the history of the M10 goes, that's pretty much it. Now, I usually like to compare premium tanks against their premium tank rivals, but the Panther M10 doesn't have any premium tank rivals. It is the only Tier 7 premium medium tank in the game. Thankfully, I happen to have a lot of other Tier 7 medium tanks sitting in my garage, so we're going to be able to do a side-by-side comparison. So starting off with the hit points, it gets 1300 hit points, which matches a fully upgraded Panther. It gets a lot of hit points, significantly more hit points than most of the other medium tanks up here. Only the Chiri comes anywhere close, and that gets 50 hit points less. So hit points are definitely a positive for the Panther M10. When it comes to weight, it's quite a heavy medium tank. It weighs about 46 tons for me. It weighs even more than the Panther does. It's significantly heavier than even the Chiri and all the other tanks up here. So it's a heavy tank. However, it gets a decent engine. It gets a 700 horsepower engine. Again, its engine matches the top engine on a fully upgraded Panther, but it does get more engine power than any of the other tanks up here. But even though it gets the best engine, unfortunately it's pushing the heaviest medium tank, and that is reflected in its top speed, which is only 46 kilometers an hour. That is the second slowest of all the medium tanks up here. Only the Chiri is slower. Even the Panther is quicker at 55 kilometers an hour. It's significantly quicker than the Panther M10. It's definitely a lot slower than any of the other medium tanks up here. So the acceleration is not bad on the tank, but it definitely doesn't accelerate or doesn't have a top speed as good as any of the other tanks up here, with the exception of maybe the Chiri. When it comes to the traverse speed, it's actually okay. It's not the best of all the tanks up here, but it's not the worst. It's definitely just average. However, one thing that does confuse me a little bit regarding its traverse speed is the fact that it's better than the Panthers. Even though it's using the same engine, it's using the same suspension, and it weighs more, somehow it manages to traverse better than the Panther. And not only does it traverse better than the Panther, its turret traverse is much better than the Panther's as well, even though it has all this sheet metal that's been added to the turret traverse. So as regards hull and turret traverse, I'm actually not quite sure why it's better than the Panther, but it is, and I'm not complaining. Yes, the turret traverse of 38 degrees per second, just like the hull traverse, is very good. Again, it's not the best. The Comet, the T20, KV-13 have it beaten, but it's very similar turret traverse to the Chiri or the A44. In fact, the only tank up here that's significantly worse than the Panther M10 with regards to its traverse speed and its turret traverse speed is the Panther. So I don't quite understand that logic. When it comes to view range, we come to one of the Panther M10's biggest weaknesses. It only has 350 meters of view range, which is absolutely terrible for a Tier 7 medium tank. In fact, of all the tanks up here, of all the Tier 7 medium tanks in the game, stock, the Panther M10 is worse than all of them. In fact, the KV-13 is the only stock Tier 7 medium tank that has worse view range than a Panther M10. However, the signal range is quite good. It gets 710 meters of signal range, which is the same as a fully upgraded Panther. Only the Cheery has it beaten. Now, when it comes to armor, the Panther M10 is not known for its armor, but on paper the armor is actually quite good. When we take a look at the hull armor, it gets 85mm on front, 50 on the sides, 40 on the rear. Now that's comparable to the hull armor on a Panther, obviously, because it's the same tank, but it's better hull armor than a Cheery gets. It's better hull armor than a Comet gets. It's better hull armor than a T20 gets. Only the KV-13, which is known as an armored tank, has better hull armor, and the A-44's armor is very, very troll. So the two Russian tanks on paper have better armor, but the Panther M10 actually compares quite well against all the other medium tanks. The turret armor on paper is 100mm thick on front, 45 on the sides, 45 on the rear. Now compared to the Panther, it's worse, but this is the upgraded turret. On a stock Panther with a stock turret, the turret armor is identical, but it gets better turret armor frontally than a Cheery does. It gets very, very similar frontal armor to the Comet for reasons I'm going to show you in Tank Compare in a moment, but its turret armor is even better than it is on a T20's, and it's better than it is on an A44's, at least from the front. But again, on paper, the armor doesn't look too bad. So taking a look in Tank Viewer, you can see that the hit model for the Panther M10 is the Panther. It's exactly the same tank. So even though visually it looks more like a Wolverine, the actual hit model for the tank is that of a Panther. So the model in-game has a square end, but that armor is missing. You've got side plates that are hanging down closer to the tracks. That's missing. You've got the side armor that was added to the turret to make it look like a Wolverine. All of that's missing. The front of the tank is a little bit more steep on the Wolverine. That's missing. And the rounded lower glacis on the actual in-game model, that's all missing. It's just a Panther. It looks identical to a Panther. It's got all the usual weak spots for a Panther tank, even though it looks completely different. It uses exactly the same hit model, and that means that the front of the tank, the front of the turret, is 100mm thick. Now that is very, very flat. You can pen it, but you've got to get past the gun mantlet in order to pen the front of the turret, and it's not as easy as it sounds, and we're going to come back to the front of the turret in a moment. 85mm just refers to the front of the tank, and again, it's just a Panther. It means that the armor can bounce, you can angle. Be very careful not to over angle, but sometimes guns will have no problems penning you. Sometimes your armor works. It doesn't work all the time, but it's just a Panther. 50mm refers to the weak machine gun port again. Also the lower glacis, traditional weak spot on most German tanks. It's weak on the Panther M10 as well, even though it's hidden behind rounded armor on the model. And the side of the tank is only 50mm thick, and again that makes this tank quite hard at side scraping. Now traditionally, German tanks are quite good at side scraping, but the Panther isn't. It's got a lot of weak side armor, and if you over angle at all, enemy tanks are going to be able to pen your side, because you've got 50mm here. The side of the turret is only 45mm. The rear of the turret's only 45mm. So yes, it looks as if it has lots of spaced armor, but none of that armor appears in the hit model. The gun mantlet itself is 45mm around the gun, but we're going to get back to that in a moment. And another reason you can't side scrape very well in this tank is you've only got 40mm of armor behind the tracks. So if you try to side scrape, you're exposing a lot of weak armor, and a lot of guns are going to be able to penetrate the side of this tank with absolutely no problems. The tracks themselves are considered 25mm thick. The tracks don't actually cover any of the hull, so shots into the tracks don't penetrate from the front of the tank. The shots will go straight through the tank without penetrating the hull. So your tracks can eat shots without actually doing any hull damage. 20mm refers to the gun, so we can pretty much ignore that, and the top of the tank is only 17mm thick. So again, if you're an RD player, Panther M10s, they're not a small target. A Panther M10 is quite a big medium tank. They've got no armor on top, and this is where you want to be targeting them. In fact, even if you hit the side of a Panther M10, you're probably going to hit and do full damage. It's only 50mm thick, or 40 in places. Now, while the armor may not be fantastic and it's typically Panther, there are some good points, and the major good point is its turret armor, or its spaced armor on the gun mantlet. It's got an absolutely huge gun mantlet. Now, this was added to make it look like the Wolverine, but in-game it actually counts as spaced armor. So you've got 100mm of spaced armor covering 100mm in place, in places, 25mm of armor in other places, but basically spaced armor on the gun mantlet, and it's a huge gun mantlet. And it gets even better because other areas of the gun mantlet have 50mm, other areas of the gun mantlet have 40mm, although I can't find them exactly, and even 20mm. It gets 20mm of spaced armor on the gun mantlet in other places. So while the gun mantlet can be penned by quite a few tanks, I find that the gun mantlet on the Panther M10 reminds me a lot of the Comet. It covers most of the front of the turret. It can be quite tall. It can absorb a lot of shots without you taking any damage. So yeah, definitely this is a tank that can go hull down. If you go hull down in a Panther M10, just expose your turret. You're exposing the strongest armor on your tank, and you're exposing a surprisingly tall gun mantlet. So let's talk about the gun. And the Panther M10 comes with the KWK-42L70. It's a standard gun you get on most German tanks from Tier 5 and up. So yes, it's a Tier 5 gun, but on this case it's on a Tier 7 tank. It's not a good start. However, another Tier 7 German premium tank also uses this gun. And if we come to the E25, which is no longer available, much like the Panther M10 is not going to be available for much longer, you can see that the E7 or E25 also uses the PAK-42 L70. Technically, it's the same gun. They're both 75mm, but you can see a huge performance difference in the E25s. The rate of fire is incredibly fast compared to what is a decent rate of fire on the Panther M10. It's got the same penetration, 150 penetration, and again at Tier 7 it's not great. Both of these tanks do get special matchmaking, however. The premium ammo gets 194, which is quite good for the tiers it's going to be facing, but basically it's the same guns, same low alpha damage of 135. But the differences continue because the E25 has 0.3 accuracy, so while the penetration is not very good for a Tier 7 tank, the E25 is able to snipe weak spots. The accuracy is good enough. And while the accuracy is okay on the Panther M10, it's not fantastic. It's definitely not in the same ballpark as the E25 is. Also, the aiming time is incredibly good on the E25 at 1.5 seconds compared to 2.3 seconds aim time on the Panther M10. So really, the gun performs a lot better on the E25 than it does on the Panther M10, even though they're both Tier 7 premium vehicles and they both get exactly the same matchmaking. Now, having said that, the Panther M10 can perform. I mean, it's not fantastic, it's not a fantastic gun, but it can actually perform. So the rate of fire is okay. 13.33. However, one small problem that the Panther M10 faces is the aim time is 2.3, so the rate of fire is quicker than the aim time. So it's another one of these tanks where you got to be careful if you're spamming off shots as soon as you're reloaded. Quite often you're not going to be fully aimed, and 0.35 accuracy is good, but it's not great. And if you're firing off shots before being fully aimed, then sometimes the accuracy can let you down on the gun. Having said that, one thing that really surprised me about the Panther M10 was its ability to shoot on the move. For a gun that only has 0.35 accuracy, I found the Panther M10 very good at shooting on the move. While the gun has a decent rate of fire, the penetration is lacking, the alpha damage is lacking, the accuracy is not fantastic, and the aim time is not fantastic. The gun definitely is not a strength on this tank. In fact, it's probably one of its biggest weaknesses. And not only is it one of its biggest weaknesses, but something I just don't understand about the gun is this. Because according to Wargaming's philosophy, a premium tank is supposed to be better than the in-game tank or a stock version of the in-game tank it represents, and not quite as good as a fully upgraded tank. And as we're focused on the gun, we might as well just take a look at tank compare. We're going to compare the Panther M10 versus the Panther. Now this Panther here is completely stock. So what we can see here is they're both using exactly the same gun. The stock Panther uses exactly the same gun, and when we come down to the gun performance, we've got the same alpha damage, we've got the same penetration, we've got the same shell price, we've got the same shell trajectory speed, but what we don't have is the same DPM. So even though the Panther M10 is a premium tank that uses the same gun, the same stock gun on the Panther, and premium tanks are supposed to perform better than the stock tanks of their own tier, you can see that the guns really just don't perform. The gun is much better. Even though it's not a great gun, it is much better on the Panther stock than it is on the Panther M10. You've got a faster rate of fire. You've got obviously a faster reload time. The aim time and the accuracy the same. The gun depression of 8 degrees is quite good, but again, it's the same. But yet, we suffer a big DPM hit. Now, 1800 DPM on the Panther M10 is quite good, and as per usual, you can actually upgrade that with crew skills and equipment. But again, a stock Panther gets over 2025 DPM. So the gun performs much better on a stock Panther than it does on a Panther M10, and that really does, as I say, surprise me, because usually a tank or a premium tank is supposed to perform a lot better than the stock version of the tank it represents in-game. Now, there are other differences. If we come down and we take a look between the stock Panther and the Panther M10, you can see that the stock Panther gets tougher matchmaking because it doesn't get special matchmaking like the Panther M10 does. It also, the Panther M10 also happens to get more hit points. Now that's only more hit points compared to the stock Panther. If you upgrade the turret on the Panther, you get 1300 hit points, exactly the same as the Panther M10. The signal range is much better on the Panther M10. However, the Panther is a lot quicker in a straight line. It's got a 55 km/h top speed compared to a 46 km/h top speed on the Panther M10. So the Panthers, even the stock Panther, is actually faster than the Panther M10 is. The armor is identical on both tanks because they're both stock. And then we come down to the engine power, and once again, yes, the Panther M10 may perform a little bit better. It gets 50 more horsepower. It gets better horsepower to weight ratio. However, it's not that much better. The engine is only 50 horsepower less. The horsepower to weight ratio isn't that much less. So really, the engine power between a stock Panther and the Panther M10, I haven't noticed too much difference. The major difference I've found between the two tanks is the traverse speed. 38 degrees per second traverse speed on the hull of the tank compared to 30 on the stock Panther is absolutely amazing. I don't understand why it's such a big difference between the two tanks, because it's the same tank. But another thing you can see is, compared to the stock Panther, the terrain resistance is actually slightly better on the Panther M10. The other major difference between the two tanks is the turret traverse speed of 38 degrees per second, again compared to 30 degrees on a stock Panther. And as I've already mentioned, the view range is incredibly bad on the Panther M10. Much worse than even the stock view range on a stock Panther. So basically what you've got is, even though Wargaming's philosophy is that a premium tank should be better than a stock tank of the same tier or same type, what you end up with the Panther M10 compared to a completely stock Panther is a tank that's slightly more maneuverable, it accelerates slightly better, it's got better signal range, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, the Panther has better view range, and it has a much better performing gun. So really, I've got to question whether or not the Panther M10 is that much better than the stock Panther, especially when it comes down to the gun. The gun on the Panther performs much better stock than it does on the Panther M10. It's not a terrible gun, but I just don't understand the logic as to why it performs so much worse on the Panther M10 than it does on the Panther. Okay folks, time to see this gun and this engine in action, along with a couple of other things I've mentioned or I'm going to mention. Now, even before we start, this is not the best game. I had a lot of games that had, in fact most of my games had more damage. But this game showed off the gun at its best, I think, mainly because it's on top tier in a tier 7 game, which seemed to happen a lot in this tank. But you can see that going uphill, the engine power is not fantastic, but getting into position I'm pushing the island here on mines, and there we go. Missed my first shot. So I did shoot before being fully aimed, and when you do that, the gun isn't very accurate, but there we go. Bounce on the hull of a Jackson, even though he was angled downwards and I was hitting him pretty much at a straight angle, and that got me spotted. So I'm shooting a tier 6. Now the Jackson is well armored for a tier 6 TD, but I'm a tier 7 medium that's bouncing on a tier 6 at a bad angle. It was a good angle for me, he was at a bad angle. Okay, and now there's the AMX AC-46. So I'm able to put a shot into the AMX AC, and because I'm shooting through bushes, I haven't been spotted. I get a second shot in, there's that rate of fire. As you can see, I've got a shot every 3.79 seconds, and considering I don't have a particularly good crew in this tank, that's pretty good. But shot into the Jackson. You're seeing the camo rating. The camo rating on this tank is quite good for a medium tank. The gun performs okay, but even still in a tier 7 game, it can struggle now and again, especially against tier 7 heavies. But I'm using my binocs. My view range is very poor on the move, as you could probably see from the view circle on the minimap. But I decide to push, and I run into the AMX. So I'm at an angle. My tracks eat the shot, and I don't have the alpha damage to be able to track the AMX AC-46, but I still have the maneuverability to be able to get to his side, and I'm going for his tracks again, miss him. Thankfully, someone else takes him out, but I'm reversing into cover, 3 RT on the enemy team, and I know they're going to be focused on me, and there we go. So 20 kilometers an hour reverse speed, but even in swampy ground, it's not great. But I'm playing exactly like a medium tank. I'm not playing it as a sniper, I'm not playing it in support, I'm playing it on the front line because I'm top tier. If this was a tier 8 game, I wouldn't be aggressive. But there we go, I've just been spotted. So I'm wondering what it was that could possibly have spotted me there. But I wasn't. Hold down. This is a very tall tank, so even though I wouldn't have expected to be spotted there, because the Panther M10 is so tall, I wasn't as hidden as I thought I was. But again, we're just advancing, we're just moving forward. And I'm flanking, so you can play the Panther M10. The engine is good enough. It's not exactly a fast medium tank, but it's not slow. The traverse speed is good. So again, it's not a fantastic game, but you're going to see some aspects of the gun popping up here. It's an E25 flanking me, but pushing up to get shots on this PZSFL. Oh, never mind. And I wasn't quick enough. Because of that aim time, I was aiming, could have taken a snapshot to get the kill, but the aim time is not good on this tank. Particularly when you take the rate of fire into consideration. Now this Jagd Panther's waiting for me to come around the corner. There's still 2 RT waiting for me to come around the corner, so I'm not going to go around the corner. I'm going to move up, I'm going to flank. Trying to flank this PZSFL, and there we go. I couldn't spot the IS until he fired. We can get a shot into the side of the IS. And we're side scraping. You can side scrape, but sometimes it just doesn't work. We've just managed to side scrape the PZSFL. So a shot on the move, something very, very good. 2 shots on the move. The Panther M10 is surprisingly good at shooting on the move. I really wasn't expecting that when I sat down to play the tank for the review, but shooting on the move was incredibly accurate, and it's something I never hear very many people talk about when they play this tank. But they've got a very good E25 driver on the enemy team, but he's no threat to me, and here we go. So, again, that accuracy, shooting before being fully aimed, I missed the Jagdpanzer IV. So there are 2 ISs down here. I've got the front of one, I've got the rear of another, but again, I'm firing. Oh, got spotted, and hit the gun mantlet. Now, because I was angled, I bounced the IS. The armor is surprisingly good. But you can see I'm going to have gun depression issues here. Okay, again, difficult shot, but Aim carefully, not sure where these shots are going. The rate of fire is good, but you can see I'm actually reloading slightly faster than I can aim, and I've just bounced the E25. Now there's that view range. He was sitting right in front of me and I could not spot him. I don't have the gun depression, so I've got to reverse back out. Now I've got the gun depression, but do I have shots? No. E25 knows what he's doing. He's staying safe. So you're getting to see the gun depression. You're going to get to see the gun in action, and sooner or later, I'm going to get tired of waiting for this E25 and focus on the tanks down below. Oh, E20. No. Is he going to come out? Nope, he is not. Okay, so aim fully. One shot in. 3.79 second reload. Second shot in. And do we have the... There we go. And we just take out the Panzer IV. So the gun can be quite good. It can deal out damage. The DPM is quite good if you've got equipment on the tank. Again, I'm on the move, and you can see that we can get up to about 40 kilometers an hour reasonably quickly, and then it gets a little bit slower. I'm struggling to reach my top speed here, but you can see the traverse speed on the tank is good. And like I say, shooting on the move, surprisingly good in the Panther M10. So I'm on 3 kills, just 1 IS left on the enemy team, but you could see how much trouble I was having penning the heavy from the front. And when you run into a lot of tier 7 heavies, you've got a choice. You can either run away or you can switch to premium ammo. I don't fire very much premium ammo in very many tanks, but Bringy and his E25 is the same gun, but it's much, much better. He's got the rear, I've got the front, and I bounce. And he gets taken out before I get any more shots in. But that was a very, very average game in the Panther M10. It wasn't an ace tanker, and it wasn't even a first class badge. It was a second class game. A very, very average game in the Panther M10. I didn't do that much damage. As you can see, Bringy did far more damage than I did. In fact, any of the games I was playing for this review where I was platooned with Bringy, he was playing the E25, and in most of those games, he was able to out-damage me, because the gun is so much better on an E25. But the damage was okay, the kills were okay. I didn't come first, it was a second class badge, but this is the other reason I wanted to show you this replay. It's because I earned almost 60,000 credits. Now that was an average game, at least an average game for me in the Panther M10. And yet I earned 60,000 credits. So you can imagine what a good game earns when I'm doing 2.5k, 3k damage in this tank. You can imagine that the credit earning of this tank is much, much better. In fact, it's almost like a tier 8 premium tank as regards its credit earning. The ammo costs are cheap, the repair costs are cheap, and you got to see that while the tank is not the fastest, it is quite maneuverable and it can be played like a medium tank. So let's talk about crew. And the Panther M10 is an excellent crew trainer. It's like most German premium medium tanks, of which there are a lot. Most of them have exactly the same crew layout. So if you want to train up crews for German medium tanks, then there are a lot of options. But it's a pretty basic crew layout, and it's very, very good for the German lines. It basically means you can train up German medium crews all the way from tier 4 on the Panzer IV-D, which has the same crew configuration, all the way up the original medium tank line, through the VK to the Panther, Panther II, E50 and E50M. They all have the same crew, so you could train up the original medium line with the Panther M10 perfectly. The second medium line that was added more recently to the game is slightly different. Now again, from tier 4, starting off with the Panzer III, you can train up crews perfectly. It matches crews perfectly from the Panzer III to the Panzer III-4, the VK3001D, 3002D, and then things change a little bit when we get to the Indian Panzer, because the Indian Panzer, the Leopard PTA, and the Leopard all have slightly different crew layouts. So while you can train up these crews completely in the Panther M10, you're going to need to have an extra radio operator. But if you've been going through the German medium lines, you should have a spare radio operator for the Panther M10. So it's not really an issue, and the Panther M10 is typically an excellent crew trainer for the Germans. Moving on to equipment, and we'll start off at the top with a toolbox. A toolbox, again, if you're playing on a budget, a toolbox toolbox is not going to be a bad addition to a Panther M10. Your tracks can eat shots. If you're playing on a budget and you've got no other equipment choices, then a toolbox is not going to hurt this tank. Filling the tanks with CO2 is not as important as it used to be. Back when I first got this tank, German tanks got set on fire with shots through the lower glacis. That doesn't happen anymore, so I don't think this is as valuable as it used to be. There are much better pieces of equipment. Enhanced torsion bars as per usual, improving the track strength, not worth it. An enhanced gun laying drive to improve your aiming speed is viable. Again, it depends on how you decide to play the tank. If you do have problems with the aim time, then you can put an enhanced gun laying drive on it. Coated optics are a perfectly viable choice for this tank. Now again, I don't like putting coated optics on tanks with poor view range, and unfortunately the Panther M10 has very poor view range. However, I was expecting the tank at the beginning of the games for the review to play a little bit more passively. I was planning to play it a little bit more second line, a little bit more as a sniper, and it turned out I didn't do that. I ended up playing it more like a traditional medium tank, and as a result there were times when I wished I had that extra 35 meters of view range on the move with coated optics, but in the end, I opted for binocs, and I think over the games I played for the review, I played about 22-23 games, didn't have time to play the full usual 30, but out of the 22-23 games I played, I found that maybe binocs helped me out a little bit more in the long run than coated optics. I definitely recommend one or the other on the tank because of that incredibly poor view range, and as you can see, with binocs, my view range gets up to 458. Both are viable, both are up to you. A medium caliber gun rammer to improve your DPM by 10% is an option I went for on this tank. It gets my DPM up from 1800 to almost 2000 DPM with just this piece of equipment, and more DPM on a Panther M10 is good because the penetration on the gun is not fantastic at 150. You will find yourself bouncing shots. The alpha damage is not great, so the faster you can put out shots, the better. However, there is a downside to putting the gun rammer on the tank, and that's because the aim time is slower than the reload time. And by putting a gun rammer on the tank, even though you get more DPM, it means you actually reload even faster than your aim time. So you've really got to bear that in mind. So while having more DPM is great, you are sacrificing that aim time quite a lot. And really, it's up to you. A medium spall liner, again, not fantastic choice. I think there are better pieces of equipment, but once again, this is one of these tanks that gets absolutely messed up by HE. You've got very weak roof armor, you've got very weak engine deck armor, the sides of the tank aren't fantastic, so splash damage does do a lot of damage to a Panther M10, and again, it's really up to, depending on whether or not you find yourself getting targeted by HE a lot, as to whether or not you go for a spall liner. However, the Panther M10 is a tier 7 tank, and usually when you get into tier 7, tier 8 games, there are far fewer tanks firing HE, so it's really usually only RT you've got to worry about, but again, choice is up to you. I think there are better pieces of equipment. Wet ammo rack, I think, is a waste of time on this tank. I don't get ammo racked very much. I did get ammo racked a couple of times, but definitely not often enough to actually notice it. Improve vents, I went for on the tank, just to improve absolutely everything about the tank by a little bit. Again, I think there are better pieces of equipment. You might choose to go for coated optics over vents, but this helps me with my aim time, but it also improves my DPM, it helps me with my view range, it helps me with a few different areas where the tank is weak. A camo net is kind of viable on this tank, even though it's a medium tank. The Panther M10 does get quite a good camo rating for a medium tank. However, one word of warning is that camo rating is only on paper. What you got to remember about the Panther M10 is it's a big medium tank. In fact, it's as big as a lot of heavy tanks are. That means that if you're using bush mechanics, if you're hiding behind a bush, quite often, without even knowing it, your tank is actually exposed. The bush is not big enough to hide your tank. So while the camo rating for the tank is actually quite good, and a camo net is a viable option choice for it as a result, I think the size of the tank cuts down on its camo rating immensely. But really, again, if you're playing on a budget, binocs, toolbox, and camo net are perfectly viable on this tank. But I think there are quite a few options for the tank. As I say, the biggest disappointment with regards to equipment is the fact that this thing doesn't get vert stabs, because it's actually very good at shooting on the move, and I wasn't expecting it to be. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. Once again we have ended up in a tier 7 game, but this time we were on Cliff. And it's just luck that the 2 games I picked out happen to be tier 7 games, but on the other hand, out of the 20 plus games I played in this tank, I'd say about 2 out of every 3 games I was in a tier 7 game as top tier. The matchmaking does seem quite kind to the Panther M10, even when I was platooned. But once again, I'm going to be playing more like a traditional medium tank. You can see that the acceleration, particularly going uphill, here I'm struggling to get over 40 kilometers an hour. So even though the tank has 48 kilometers an hour, it reaches 40 kilometers an hour relatively quickly and then struggles to get higher. And of course, as soon as you start maneuvering, you end up dropping speed, but missed my first couple of shots. But again, we're accelerating up to 40 kilometers an hour. There are 3 arty on the enemy team, so once again, lots of arty. And this Cromwell is going to be causing me some problems, but I do manage to get some beautiful shots into this Cromwell, as you're going to see. And again, this was quite an early game I played in the Panther M10 for the review. And this is where it really surprised me regarding shooting on the move. Now, there was a shot before being fully aimed, and that shot went absolutely nowhere near where I aimed, but I was going to be difficult penning the Churchill. But we can pen the T-43, I get shot by the Cromwell, and then we bounce the Cromwell. But there we go, 1 shot on the Cromwell, and look at this, shot on the move while reversing, and it's a hit. Don't manage to do it a second time. This guy is hull down. Now you'll notice I'm actually shooting here, and this is because my view range is not good. That Cromwell could be back up there, that Cromwell could be looking at me and spotting me. I wouldn't know, because he would spot me before I spot him. But again, playing quite aggressively. I'm not as far ahead. Excuse me. I'm not as far ahead as the A44. And we bounce. We just bounced on the turret of a T-43. Don't get the kill. So we're being pushed on the right from the 8 lines, but you can see the reverse speed, 20 kilometers an hour reverse speed, very good. And I'm moving back into a position just in case the enemy team decide to advance. And then I realize that maybe there's a break in the enemy lines I can exploit. That Black Prince has gone south. He's actually gone down the hill again, and the Chaffee and Cromwell are going to be busy with those ELCs. So I decide to push forward. Now maybe I could have stayed back, maybe I could have taken shots of that IS on the minimap, but I decide to push forward because there are 3 arty on the enemy team, or at least 2 arty now. And this is where, if I was using coded optics, I might not have seen this arty, but I sit in this bush, wait for my binocs to kick in. Binocs have kicked in, and there we go. We've just spotted the GW Panther. So you're going to see the rate of fire here. So I get 2 shots in, and as you can see, not using 6th Sense on this particular crew, don't have a very good crew in the tank, but look at the Cromwell, and again, a reverse shot on the move. This tank is just so surprisingly good at shooting on the move. Usually, slower tanks are good at shooting on the move, but yeah, I don't know. Even in 9.6, this tank really surprised me. Some beautiful shots on the move on the Cromwell. But now that arty has been taken care of, at least one of the arty, the most dangerous one, I move back to support the south. And again, I could have done this sooner, but there we go. We've just bounced on a T-43 because he's angled. Just bounced on a T-43 again. Now we're angling. T-43 bounced. I'm at an angle. So putting shots into the upper front plate of the VK, and the gun is good enough to do that. We bounce the VK because I'm angled, and we can just start putting shots in here. Now you can see that my reload is just slightly faster than my aim time at the moment, but we're still able to put shots into the VK. We're staying at an angle, and unfortunately we missed that one. Now, something I haven't mentioned, this is actually the last footage I'm recording for the review today, Something I haven't mentioned, and I don't mention in the rest of the review, is the fact that the Panther M10 is a heavy medium tank. It's quite heavy for a medium tank, but it gets a semi-decent engine. And that means that the Panther M10 has another strength that I don't mention anywhere else in the review. Again, we're shooting on the move, but that is that it's very, very good at ramming. Now, I could have gone for the ram there, but I didn't want to take the damage because there's still tanks left on the enemy team. So, the VK is quite a heavy tank. I didn't want to do comparable damage, but the Panther M10, very good at ramming. You can see that we're accelerating again. It's not the fastest. It is quite maneuverable, but it's definitely not the fastest. But we're again moving forward, again going to be shooting on the move. This tank is just so good at shooting on the move, and it's a very good rammer. So there we go. So, taking no damage from that ram, and we take out the Chaffee without having to waste another shot. So, in this game, I'm not firing any premium ammo, and when you don't fire premium ammo, you make quite a lot of credits. I've already mentioned the credit earning of this tank, but you can see that you can play it like a typical medium tank. It's not hamstrung. Some people, or some reviews I've seen, have said you've got to play it passively, that you've got to play it as a sniper. Only in some situations. I mean, if you're in a tier 8 game and there are lots of tier 8 heavies on the enemy team, you do not want to play this aggressively. But here we go, we're aiming fully, and we've just bounced on an ELC AMX there. And fully aimed, and the shot goes low. So the accuracy and the penetration hurts you. Not all the time, but it does hurt you. And that cost me kill number 4. So just one tank left on the enemy team, and again we're accelerating. Got a little bit of a downhill run, we're up to 42 kilometers an hour, but again, even though 48 is this tank's top speed, you're normally only going to be doing 40, around about 40. So no one's spotting RT, he must be to my right, and there we go, we've managed to spot him. So remember what I said about shooting on the move, and ramming. And there we go. I missed my shot on the move, making me a liar, but okay, shot on the move and then ramming. Two of the things that the Panther M10 is exceptional at, and that you don't see in any of the stats. So even though I did a lot more damage in some of the other games I played while gathering footage for the review, this one happened to be an ace tanker. And we finished top on XP with 1162, so not that hard or not that high XP to get an ace tanker. And again, 2110 damage was good. Good for a Panther M10, but I've had bigger damage games. Unfortunately, they were losses, and I didn't get any heroic medals. But 4 kills was okay, and you can see that the gun, 35 shots fired, 21 hits. The gun is accurate, but only when you let it fully aim. And I was taking quite a few shots without being fully aimed, and probably the accuracy let me down. But 3.5 is good, but it's not fantastic, and you will find yourself missing shots. Of the 21 hits, we only penned 16. So once again, even when you're top tier in a tier 7 game, this gun will cause you to bounce. If enemy tanks angle, you're going to bounce, even if they're lower tier. But the damage was nice. This tank is a damage dealer, even though the gun is one of the weakest things about it. But it is capable of doing damage, even in a tier 8 game, although in a tier 8 game usually you end up firing more premium. I received 11 hits, and 7 of them were non-penetration, so the armor is very, very good frontally. As soon as you turn to the side or over angle, then the armor is quite poor. So yeah, it's for a medium tank, it's quite well armored. The view range is definitely one of the weakest things about the tank. Now, I only spotted 2 enemy tanks. Now, one of those was Artie, and I had to sit in a bush, even though he was within my view range, and wait until my binocs kicked in order to spot him. The view range really is terrible on this tank, and in one-on-one situations, quite often the enemy tank's going to have more view range and is going to be able to get the first shot in. But once again, for 2,000 damage, we earned 71,000 credits, 72,000 credits. You can see that the ammo costs are cheap. The repair costs are cheap. I fired 35 shots. Ammo costs only came to just short of 4,000 credits. This tank is a very, very good money maker. Okay, folks, time to sum up. Is the Panther M10 worth it? Now, it's only going to be available for a short time. I was hoping to get this review out a week ago, but unfortunately real life got in the way and it's been delayed till now. But there still is time. If you're watching this video on the day it's released, there is time to actually still buy a Panther M10. This tank, again, has quite a few strengths. The hit points for a Panther M10 are very, very good. The Panther M10 can take maybe a little bit more of a beating than other tanks do. The armor is typically medium tankish. It's actually quite good for a medium tank of tier 7. It's better than most tier 7 medium tanks. I think the armor can be quite effective. I think the frontal armor can bounce shots, but you don't count on it. I think the gun mantlet is exceptionally good. This tank can go hull down. It can use the spaced armor around its huge gun mantlet in order to absorb shots, and I think a lot of people underestimate the tank as a result. The side armor and rear armor is absolutely terrible, so this is a tank you want to keep facing the enemy. If enemy get to your side and rear, then the Panther M10 just hurts. At 8 degrees of gun depression for the tank is quite good. I think 8 degrees on the Panther M10 makes it quite versatile. You can use it on hills, you can use it on slopes. There are other tanks that do it better, and there are lots of tanks that do it worse. So I definitely think 8 degrees of gun depression on a Panther M10 is a positive. It's an exceptional crew trainer. You can train up basically every single German medium tank crew in the game in this tank. It's surprisingly mobile, even for a big tank that is based on the Panther, which is not known for its mobility. I think that the top speed, while not fantastic, is okay. Definitely not a strength, but it's not a weakness either. However, the traverse speed of 38 degrees on both the hull and the turret make this tank very, very good. It's very maneuverable, it's very, very mobile, it's very, very easy to adjust to what's happening on the minimap. Much better than I was expecting. And it is an absolutely amazing moneymaker. I think it's probably the best tier 7 premium moneymaker in the game. Good games in the Panther M10 basically earn you pretty much the same credits as average games in tier 8 premium tanks. And the fact that the tank's repair costs and ammo costs are so low just add to that credit making ability. It gets special matchmaking. It will never see tier 9s, it only sees tier 8s and tier 7s. The matchmaking seems to be quite nice to the Panther M10, but not all the time. And even in a tier 8 game, I think the Panther M10 can still do a job. But the tank does have some weaknesses. And starting off with the view range, it gets 350 meters of view range, which is absolutely awful. You really have to invest in equipment to improve that view range, or you end up having to rely on teammates to spot for you. In a one-on-one situation, quite often the Panther M10 gets outplayed because it doesn't see the enemy tank before the enemy tank sees you. It's also a big target. The Panther M10 is as big as most heavy tanks of the same tier, so it's quite hard to miss a Panther, and once you get to its side, once you get to its rear, the armor is absolutely terrible. The top speed, again, definitely not a strength. It is one of the slowest tier 7 medium tanks in the game. Having said that, it is still quite fast. It is still quite mobile and agile, but it's definitely on the slow side. And then we've got the gun. The gun is one of the biggest disappointments on the tank, and it's probably one of the reasons the tank gets a very, very bad reputation. Now, it does have some strengths. I mean, the gun is surprisingly good at shooting on the move, and as mentioned, it also has 8 degrees of gun depression. Definitely, penetration is lacking. The alpha damage is lacking, and compared to the E25, the rate of fire is lacking. Even compared to the stock Panther, the rate of fire is lacking. The accuracy, as I say, is actually quite good, but the aim time is a negative. I think the gun, while not terrible and it can do a job, it's definitely one of the weakest points of this tank. Having said that, and having shown you in replays, the gun actually performs a little bit better than I was expecting it to. So on paper, the Panther M10 doesn't look fantastic. I mean, it's got terrible view range, the armor is okay from the front, but side and rear it's terrible, and its gun really is on paper an underperforming weapon. However, the Panther M10 is quite surprising. It's a very, very good moneymaker, and it's a very, very good crew trainer. And when it comes down to the brass tacks, why do you want a premium tank? Do you want to earn credits? in a premium tank? And if the answer is yes, I think the Panther M10 is a very, very good credit earner. It earns more credits than some of my tier 8 premium tanks, so it's a very, very good moneymaker. And is it a good crew trainer? The other reason why most people would buy a premium tank is it a good crew trainer? Yes, the Panther M10 is a very, very good crew trainer. So the two main reasons you would want a premium tank are two things that the Panther M10 does very, very well. It's very, very hard to find a role for the Panther M10. You see, I could say that this tank could be played passively. You could play it as a sniper, and while the Panther M10 has the accuracy and it has the rate of fire to be played as a sniper, unfortunately it doesn't have the penetration. It can snipe, it's just not very good at it. So can you play it on the front lines? I mean, for a medium tank, the frontal armor is actually quite good, and you've got that great turret armor, you've got that great gun mantlet that is surprisingly good. When you come up against tier 7 heavy tanks, when you come up against tier 8 tanks, you're going to get torn apart. It doesn't matter how good your frontal armor is, even though, as I say, it can be surprisingly good. So while you can play the Panther M10 aggressively and on the front line, it's just not great at it. It's possible, it's just not very good at it. And playing it as a standard medium tank, trying to flank in this tank, trying to get to the sides and rear of enemy vehicles, can you do it in the Panther M10? Well, yes, again, you can do that, and you can play it as a typical medium tank, but once again, the top speed is not fantastic for a tier 7 medium tank, and it's a huge target. I mean, it's a very, very big tank, so you're going to get shot in the sides, you're going to get shot in the rear, and sometimes you can't use terrain features as well in a Panther M10 as you could in other tanks. So yes, it can flank, it can be played like a traditional medium, it can play on the front lines, and it can play passively at the back lines, it can snipe. But it's not very good at any of them. It's not terrible, but it's not very good at any of them. So I think the Panther M10 is just basically a very, very average tank. I don't think it deserves the hate it gets. I've seen some very, very negative reviews about the Panther M10, but if you look up the stats on VB Addict, you'll see that the Panther M10 actually performs quite well. I think that you can have good games in it, but I also think because of the gun, you can have very, very frustrating games in it. And it's definitely not a tank I enjoy playing. It's not a tank that I would take out if I had a choice of playing two premium tanks back to back. I've got lots of premium tanks I'd rather play than the Panther M10. But that's not to say the Panther M10 can't perform. I would love to be able to give you a definitive answer and say, yes, it's a fantastic premium tank. Go buy it before it's removed from the game forever. But it's not. It's not a fantastic premium tank. But I don't think it's a terrible premium tank. And really, it's up to your priorities. Do you want to train German medium crews? If you can't afford a tier 8 premium, like for example the Panther 88, then maybe the Panther M10 is in your price bracket. And if you were to buy a Panther M10 while you own other premium tanks, I really don't see you playing the Panther M10 very much. As I say, there are plenty of other premium tanks I would rather play than the Panther M10, but it's not a terrible tank. And if I was starting out in the game and I couldn't afford a tier 8 premium tank, then maybe the Panther M10 is a very, very good choice. It's going to be very, very rare in a couple of days. It's not going to be available for purchase anymore. If you're a tank collector, you're going to want to buy the tank anyway. I don't think it's terrible. I think it can be frustrating to play now and again, but it actually performed a lot better over the 20 plus games I played than I expected it to. So on paper it's not fantastic, but I think once you get it in game, it's not too bad. So I don't think it's a terrible tank, but I don't think it's a tank I enjoy playing enough to keep playing it regularly. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.